Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Reframable Podcast, a podcast that brings you people's stories and ideas about how we can work to reframe our relationship, not just with alcohol, but with stress, anxiety, relationships, enjoyment, and so much more. Because changing our relationship with alcohol is about so much more than changing the contents of our glass. In today's episode, we talk with Steph Prangley. Steph is a nutritional therapy practitioner and recovery coach living with her husband, 3 dogs, and too many houseplants in Greenville, South Carolina. She is a coach at Reframe and runs the Sober Rebellion, a virtual private practice helping clients use nutrition and functional wellness practices to enhance recovery efforts, repair their body from the damage done with long-term alcohol use, and address underlying conditions that often overlap with chronic alcohol use. More than a nutrition practice, the Sober Rebellion is about helping people feel their best in the holistic sense, so they can let go of external expectations in a world telling them you're not enough and you come last. Today, we talk about Steph's story, which is deeply rooted in a history of high-achieving perfectionism and self-sabotage cycles. In her 20s and 30s, she escaped feelings of low self-worth by overworking and disordered eating. In her late 30s, she began healing her relationship with work, food, and her body, but developed a disordered relationship with alcohol instead. Steph has found freedom from alcohol, work addiction, and disordered eating by addressing her chronic health conditions and feelings of low self-worth. She loves serving her community and is passionate about using her training, experience, and education to serve people healing their relationship with alcohol. My name is Kevin Bellack. I'm a certified professional recovery coach and the head of coaching at the Reframe app. This podcast is brought to you by the Reframe app. Reframe is the #1 iOS app to help you cut back or quit drinking alcohol. It uses neuroscience to reframe your relationship with alcohol and unlock the healthiest, happiest you. So without any further delay, let's go chat with Steph. Yeah, and I grabbed my coffee and I was listening to some of your other podcasts too, and about you talking about coffee. And I'm like, I feel attacked.
Oh my God, you're gonna hate this too. I decided I'm like too dependent on it. So this week I've been cutting back. I've always done like half calf or even more decaf than that, but I'll drink like a ton of it. So I just get the same effect,
So
but
yeah,
it's like 5 of these like giant stupid Friends cups.
You're basically having 3 cups a day of coffee anyway.
Yeah, it's like, this is like, I don't know, a half gallon when you have 3 or 4 of them. So I've done like 3/4 calf, and I've been limiting how many I've been having. And I don't want to tell you that because I know that how much you love your coffee.
Hey, it is what it is. But yeah, to each their own and all that. But yeah, welcome, Steph. Thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I am doing great, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome on the podcast, and let's launch right in. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, and we can go from there.
Yeah, let's get into it. I always say I have kind of like a boring, sober story. A lot of it was rooted in being like just this high performing, overachieving, perfectionist type A kind of person. And I think now I understand anyone who lists off those descriptors is just like the ultimate people pleaser, and find it really hard to get in touch with like your real needs and your real wants and even your authentic self. But on paper, it shows up as someone who like really has their shit together. So, I mean, even going back to like high school, I was a top athlete, a straight A student. I was just like this good girl, like obedient good girl to pretty strict parents. And then I was on scholarship for volleyball in college, and it was just more of an extension of this like good girl persona. I didn't really drink until my sophomore year of college because being on scholarship, it's like we take it really seriously. I know like the men's teams don't have to as much, but like women's teams, we're expected not to drink. And, we still did stuff in the off season. So there was a very narrow window for that. But I had these chronic back injuries, and I decided to quit volleyball, just quit my scholarship. And then I had this huge identity crisis. And like piggybacking that off of always being this good girl, I just decided to like rebel. I started drinking, I started smoking cigarettes. I just had this like freedom to explore the typical college party life.
Mhm.
And it was really hard for me to figure out where I fit in when I wasn't an athlete anymore. So that's sort of when it started. Well, that's definitely when it started. And I remember like questioning my drinking even in college. Like, I
Really?
remember thinking, I don't like this. I don't like how much it changes me. But then I did like how much it changed me
Yeah.
because I was just this weirdo, like this introverted girl, like socially awkward. I didn't have a lot of self confidence. And obviously alcohol like changes that for us, like could make me bubbly and I could flirt with guys and make new friends and whatever. But um I don't know, like that's when it started. And it was definitely like binge drinking. Looking back, I was never someone, even if I did have one or two, I never wanted to drink like that. Like, I always wanted to binge drink.
Yeah.
And then as I grew up, it was more like in my 20s, more of that like deeply rooted belief in I needed to like look a certain way or achieve a certain number on the scale, achieve a certain title at work, earn a certain income. There was like always more and more and more.
Yeah.
I never felt like I was enough as I was. And, socially awkward and shy and
Yeah.
whatever. It was just like alcohol allowed me to tolerate crowded places, which I hate, and tolerate loud places, which I hate. And I don't know. It feels like when I look back, I was always numbing with something. Like, if it wasn't like overworking, then it was
Yeah.
disordered eating or over exercising. And then when that became unsustainable, it was like, okay, I'm going to drink to cope with the stress and the pressure and the fact that like I feel like a loser because I can't keep up with this crazy lifestyle I'm like inflicting on myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100% get that, because that's definitely with the kind of self-soothing or whatever, whether it was with overworking or over drinking. Those are two of my big things, that because I always look at it like the overworking was just like easy, right? Because I felt like I needed to do more because I didn't feel like I was enough, or I was good enough, or I had to keep up this you know tempo or whatever. And it was always there, right? Just never ending work. We can just always keep doing that. So I think that's the easy thing that a lot of people dive into. But then you also have alcohol where it can fuel that potentially as well. All the way back to I was a, yeah, I was a D3 athlete. I played football for 2 years, and definitely did not use the mentality of I'm not going to drink during the season or things like that. Like, I dove right in college and started drinking, but then I had to change my major and things, so midway through, which then I, stopped playing football, which then led to a little bit of identity crisis there as well. I understand where you're coming from for that. That makes sense. And then how did that continue to play out for you with the work and all those kind of, maybe, I don't know, would you call them self-sabotaging type of behaviors? Or
Yeah, I mean, I self-sabotage, I call it self-harm now. I mean, it really
okay.
is like forms of self-harm. It's just not as overt as other things that we think about. But when I think of just the physical and emotional ringer I threw myself in, it really was truly harmful. But yeah, it showed up as this pattern. I would like, so I, before I became a coach full time, I was an actuary. And so I talked about being this like high achieving whatever. Well, there's like 20,000 fully credentialed actuaries in the world. And like, I'm one of them. That's just like another way that showed up for me.
Yeah.
Um, I always felt like I needed to get through those exams and like prove that to someone. I don't know who. Like, looking back, I'm like, I don't know who I was trying to prove myself to. I was just like, hey, world, look at me. I'm super special. And I just would get in the cycle of like being all in to study for the exams. And at the time, kind of starving myself, going on like riding on caffeine, cigarettes, and unprescribed Adderall to get like to maintain this weight while I didn't have the time to work out or eat healthy. Um, where I could function on like 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And then of course this, like, once I'm like, I'll just do this until I do take the exam. Then I would take the exam, and then it was like, and I'll like party for a little bit, and then I'll become like the good girl again, do the diet, get back into exercising until the next exam. And it was just this like super toxic lifestyle where I wasn't taking care of myself. And when I felt super overwhelmed with all of these unreasonable expectations, then I would just drink so I could forget about it. And, I wouldn't say that was even like weekly. It wasn't something I did weekly. It was definitely self-medicating as needed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then like that pattern kind of happened until my mid 30s or so. I'm almost 42 now. So in like my mid to late 30s, I started I just started like suffering the consequences of that toxic lifestyle. So, I mean, I took this promotion in Pittsburgh after I got like my actuarial credentials, and it was just like the ultimate toxic environment. I mean, me crying in my office, being micromanaged, even though I had like, I don't know, like 12 years of experience at that point. It was like one of those just horror situations that you hear about. And that isn't that common in an industry like actuarial. Like typically we're treated pretty well. Like, yeah, you can work a lot, but like the emotional stuff that I went through is pretty uncommon in a
Mm.
professional environment like that. And my body just fell apart, and I think that toxic job was just the straw that broke the camel's back. But my physical body fell apart. Like um, I mean, I like chronic fatigue was like my biggest thing, and digestive issues and other hormone stuff. But the chronic fatigue was really debilitating. Like I would try to walk my dogs and for 5-10 minutes just around the block, and I would have to nap for 2 hours after that. The brain fog, like my body was just shutting down. And that's sort of when I started thinking about like, I mean, I started getting into nutrition at that point. And I'm like, okay, I am chronically ill. Like I am so sick. And everyone's saying that I look like, going to regular doctors. It's like, oh, have you tried losing weight or taking an antidepressant? And I'm like, yeah.
No, I never thought of that. Like, thanks for your expert advice.
I know. I'm like telling you that my body's falling apart, and I can't even, like, I would forget words to basic things. And
Okay.
like I couldn't remember the word for like squash. Like I wanted my husband to pick up some squash to make some dish with or something. And like bathtub, like just everyday words. It was like, what's that? Like, what's that word? What's that word? I mean, it was really serious. And
Oh,
I mean, it did, I would say it looked a lot like depression, but I knew it wasn't that. Like I knew it was something else. And so now, like looking back, it's like, okay, it's just like a combination of abusing the crap out of your body for like 20 years,
well, and that's what I was going to ask. Was it like directly related to overwork or alcohol or something like that you noticed, or was it just that combination of everything building up over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just a combination of that. I think the under eating, I mean, it's just years of stress. So like the
Yeah.
under eating would be like physical stress on the body
Yeah.
and creating these like famine conditions unnecessarily,
Mm-hmm.
and over exercising. So I was like still playing competitive volleyball even after college. And so I was
Okay.
going on very little sleep, stress at work, trying to climb the corporate ladder, pass these exams, very like under eating, undernourishing. And then like, yeah, like periodic binge drinking, smoking cigarettes, living off
Yeah.
of caffeine and sugar. And I don't know, it's like, of course, we all pay lip service to how terrible stress is for us, but like that's it working in real life. It's like, and our bodies are super resilient. So yeah, it didn't show up right away in my 20s when I can like bounce back. It took 15 years of
Yeah.
that for it to really show up in my body. And then now it's been trying to recover ever since, really. And, a lot of what I realized doing my nutrition stuff is, okay, I've been under eating. That is not the way to go. The calories in, calories out thing has been wildly debunked. And that's how I've been living my life, trying to shrink myself
Mm.
as much as humanly possible. So I started really working on my relationship with food and making peace with my body, realizing that these years of under eating may have done permanent damage to my metabolism, and just finding a way to accept that, I probably won't look like I did in college like ever again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's probably okay for me to like put my energy elsewhere. But I didn't really, when I was making peace with food, making peace with my body, I mean, I was forced into it. I was chronically ill. I was on the couch. I mean, I went from playing competitive sports to couch bound, almost like what seemed like overnight, but it was a decade plus
Yeah.
of getting
And
there.
and when was this?
This was in like early 2019. It wasn't that
Okay.
long ago. Yeah. Well, I started working on the food and body stuff. Yeah, probably around then.
Okay.
But I started this talk with the perfectionism, the feelings of low self-worth, like I always had to prove myself. I didn't really uncover any of that and how it related to the disordered eating and stuff like that. Like I just realized like I don't have to like my body to respect it, and I'm never going to feel better unless I treat it well. And like that was the motivation for it. I didn't know about this other stuff, and so I kind of started drinking to numb that stuff. I didn't have the food restriction to distract me from all of that other stuff that was underlying it.
Yeah. That have been building up or there for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said binge drinking before that, and then how did that maybe change? And I'm trying to think 2019, when was COVID? Oh, 2020 that started, did that change then, as far as the drinking aspect of it, and how did that progress?
Yeah, it was COVID related. I mean, or maybe the timing like was coincidental. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it just so happened that
It
I
didn't
went
help, right?
from, it didn't help. And my husband and I lived on a farm at that time. So we were like kind of living our best life. We like had all this property and we were kind of isolated anyway. But yeah, I mean, the pandemic really, really like hit me hard with that. So I was, feeling pretty good about the way my body looked and not feeling my worth was tied to that. But I just started drinking to numb like what was going on in the world and stop what was going on in my head.
Yeah.
I got so much of my, like, I felt so much of my self worth revolved around being productive and accomplishing things and being this high achiever. And so, tying that into the chronic illness where I no longer had anything to really show off or prove that I was worthy in a way. And I felt like a loser. Like I just felt like this loser. Like I can't move my body the way I want to because I'm sick. I can't really pursue this outside business I want to do because I'm so fatigued, and I have to just do the corporate job because it's paying the bills. I can't even do that well
I was going to
because
ask, like, how did that? I mean, because I would assume that that fatigue, and if you can't remember, and I don't know how that exactly showed up, but if you can't remember, like, hey, can you pick up a squash, like, right, and you're doing actuary work, like, that must have been tough.
I don't know how I did it, honestly. Like part of it is I took a demotion with the last job I worked at. So we went from toxic environment to really good environment, but I like deliberately took a demotion there. So it was, I mean, kind of easier work for me. I was way overqualified for what I was doing there.
Yeah.
That helped. I worked from home. That was always a condition. And I worked flex hours. My boss, I just had a great boss. Um,
Oh.
and I took disability from the toxic job, and I took disability for a period of time at the good job, my most recent job. So, I mean, if I'm honest, I don't think anyone from there will be listening to this, but I don't think I ever really worked more than 30 hours a week as a full-time employee there. And I would spread that out too. So I might work some Saturdays, or I
Yeah.
would take naps in the middle of the day and then work a little later. That's how I got around that.
Yeah.
But I still felt like a loser. I mean, it doesn't feel good to like bust your ass to get these credentials and feel really capable of being a high performer in the workplace and knowing that, hey, your body just can't keep up with your ambitions,
Yeah.
whether it's career related or physical health or even relationship. Like my relationship suffered during this time. It's hard to watch your wife, who you're used to seeing like active and happy and out and about and socializing, like on the freaking couch, you know?
Yeah.
So all of that combined with the pandemic, I think is what really, where my drinking really took off. You know, the bottles of wine, like a bottle or two of wine a week, turned into a box of wine. I didn't want to. I didn't want to know. Like I didn't want
Yeah.
to know how much I was drinking, and I could justify it as, well, I get a like boxes of wine. It stays better longer in the
Yeah. It's
pandemic. We don't want to
cheaper.
be going to the grocery store. Yeah, like everything. Yeah, I found
Yeah.
like every reason. And I don't know. I had a lot of feelings of inadequacy because of the chronic illness I had. I mean, there, you know, body image work isn't done. So there was still a lot of that going on. Not as much how it looked, but what it could do or couldn't do.
Mhm.
It was hard for me to not be able to play sports and go to yoga and ride my bike and doing these things I love doing. That's just depressing. It's depressing
Yeah.
to not physically be able to do hobbies. And so I don't know. During the pandemic, I would say it became almost daily. Like that's really when it really took off. And
Yeah.
then
Because then you throw in that uncertainty, right, of everything going on in the pandemic, which isn't going to help things at all.
yeah, it was really hard. And then we weren't particularly happy living out on the farm either. So we sold the farm and moved to the city. And then I started kind of looking at my drinking habits. And then my new cycle was like the whole detox to retox cycle. So I'd be like, wow, I've been drinking a lot. I'm going to take a few weeks off and then magically be able to moderate my drinking when I come back. Um,
And that was like kind of like what you said before about like, okay, once I get past like when you're studying for the test, once I get past this, I'll do that. Once I get past this, I'll focus on that. Or once I do this detox, I'll be able to introduce it back in, those thoughts, like that detox to retox.
yeah. Yeah, that's my pattern. And I talk about that all the time on my meetings, where it's like conditional living in some way or another, where it's like you wait for something to happen in order to really start living. So for me, at first, it was actuarial credentials. And it's like, once I do that, then I can take care of my health, or then I can date with purpose and have a social, whatever. And it's just expecting things to change once you hit these new milestones it's still hard for me to get out of that way of thinking, I guess.
Yeah.
And even though I know it's like your new normal, it doesn't, like, that high doesn't last for long after you achieve something. I don't know. I just still think, I mean, you totally picked up on it. It's always been my pattern.
Yeah.
And,
And
you know,
mine too. I'm not, yeah, I mean,
oh,
for
okay.
sure.
You have experience with this
Yeah.
toxic pattern.
Once I do this, then I'll be happy with myself. Then I'll be, once I pass that test, or once I, do this at work or get this promotion or whatever, then I can relax. Right. And that's just not how, it's not how things work. It's not that we don't get somewhere. Like it was always like that. I don't know. I always hate talking about happiness, because I don't like, people are like, oh, once I do this, I'll be happy. It's like, no, it's not about being happy. It's just about, I mean, you might be in that moment, but that's not, happiness isn't something that carries with you for a long time. Like I just wanted to be like content with myself for once, have a little joy that I could, access more frequently. Um, and it's tough, right? When you're always chasing that. Once I get past this deadline, once I get past this, okay, I'm going to take a month off from alcohol. And once I do that, then I'll be able to, um, as I would, as I used to say, then I'll be able to drink more normally, um, or moderate or whatever. And then what happens when I went 4 days and drank during that month? Like that kind of was like, oh, I was like, oh, whatever, it's not that big a deal, and I brushed it off and kind of just kept going with it. Um, so it's tough to it's very hard to face some of those things and to change that mentality.
Well, I mean, I like what you said about how like we can't really achieve happiness, like even hitting these like the certain goals that we set up for ourselves or whatever. Like happiness is the process, and I don't know
Yeah.
why after like I don't know how this pattern that we're describing right now, I don't know how it was so hidden to me. Like I really did not notice that until a few months ago, like after over a year of being alcohol free, like
Mm-hmm.
that, like these toxic patterns that I held, just they weren't visible to me, and I didn't even notice how they shifted from like the overworking to like the body stuff and the food and exercise stuff to the like drinking stuff. Like I didn't even see that progression until recently. It's like bonkers how much my
Yeah.
blinders were on,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
And I think it's I think it's hard too, because it's usually not like it's usually slow and gradual over time, like this build up, right? Our habits change. We go from maybe socially drinking, binge drinking, to maybe having that one drink whenever we get home from work because we're stressed, or in another setting. Um, and then that turns into two, but it's just like, and I'm not, for me, it was gradual. It was like, I don't know if it's from Hemingway, but like, how did, he says I think it's The Sun Also Rises. There's a quote where he's like, how did you go bankrupt? And the quote is like, gradually and then suddenly. And I always think about that, because that's kind of how my alcohol use showed up. It was just gradual build up over time, and then all of a sudden I had stressors that hit that, made it kind of just drop off that cliff, or spike up, whichever graph you're looking at. um, and that's just so hard but like, you're right, like whenever you actually work on something and then you take a look back, you can kind of start putting the pieces together, and it makes a little bit more sense. And that helped me, I know, on my own path to take a look at that and kind of almost, I don't know, forgive myself, or however you want to look at it, for how it showed up.
I always like to honor that part of my story too. Like, I'm not proud that alcohol was my self medication or my only coping mechanism, but I think, like, I don't know what would have happened to me if I didn't have that. Um, I don't think we really touched on a lot of like those periods of my life, but in some ways, it's like I don't know that I would be here if I didn't have a way of escaping certain realities that I went through.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, I block a lot of that stuff out too. Like my memory of like childhood, younger years and stuff like that is pretty fuzzy. Um, but there's all of that underlying trauma stuff too that contributes to these feelings of low self-worth, where you feel like you need to prove yourself or you feel like you need to whatever. It's like all of that comes from a place. We didn't I don't think we like with autonomy decided that for
Yeah.
ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's definitely, I think, like, I don't know, it's ingrained in our culture, right? I mean, it's always like more, more, more. Like, what's the next thing? All these advances are supposed to make everything easier and more efficient, and it just we still have so much more work that's always piled up, and it's always there. And I'm not to keep talking about work there, but I mean, it's just always that, it's always something. and it just fast paced kind of living for the next thing, or trying to block out the thing that I don't want to think about and worry about. So that's why I say, like, it's alcohol became my thing more and more over time. But just, everybody has a thing. Everybody has a thing. There's a handful of people maybe don't, and they're spread out and they're well balanced and self-accepting and all of that stuff. But um, so it's just like, this was my thing, and I had to work on it. And like you said, like, I'm glad as well that I had to go through this. I'm happy that alcohol was in my life. I can say that now looking back, right? Because it forced me to change and that. But I wouldn't have said that 4 years ago. It got me here talking to you, right? And that's kind of the things I think
Same.
about, right? It's that it forced me to learn new ways to cope, because that was the only way I had before.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like how you said too, it's important for people to realize that it is often gradual. I think that's a lot of what some of us are trying to do out there with, breaking the stigma, where it's like you're an alcoholic or you're a normie or whatever, and it's like, well, no, 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 no. Like, this is an addictive substance, and human beings with enough exposure will get addicted to it to some degree.
Yep.
And the emotional dependency, I think, is sounds like probably where we both were on it. But that's still very real. Like, it's still a very real
Yeah.
dependency that we come across. And it's just, it does sneak up on you. And, it did for me too. And I remember I didn't think that quitting drinking was going to be that hard for me. Like, I remember distinctly thinking that because I had taken weeks and months off at a time before.
Yeah.
But when you approach it with, instead of it having like this hard deadline, which I always had, right? I always
Mm-hmm.
had that like detox to retox cycle thing where I'm
Yeah.
going to take a month off or 2 months off and see if I feel better, and then I can start drinking again. Like, that was always the goal. Like, anyone can willpower their way through a month or two or whatever. But when like the final time I quit drinking, it was like, I'm like, okay, I got some stuff going on here and I need to deal with that. And approaching it from, why am I drinking in the first place? Like, that was way, way harder than I thought it was going to be because of what you said. It's gradual, it creeps up on you. You don't realize you're using it as a coping mechanism. You don't realize that it's like your only go to stress relief and anxiety relief, and the only time of day you allow yourself to turn your brain off.
Mm-hmm.
And, so you have to learn all of that stuff. Like, okay, I know stress is a trigger, but how does stress even show up in my life?
Yeah.
Like, what does that even look like for me? Because like the one time I almost slipped was when I had this, like, I was just like getting it from every direction. I just felt super duper overwhelmed. And I knew this. So I like booked a cabin by myself with one of my dogs up in the mountains. And it was just like an impulse. I went to pick up some snacks and I picked up some little like crappy boxes of wine, like the little ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to the cabin and I'm like, I know I don't want this right now. Like, I know I don't want the alcohol. Like, what do I want? And it's like, I just want this overwhelming feeling to go away. And then, taking the time to recognize that space between even buying it and actually drinking it and saying, like, what is it that I really want? And then you can kind of back up. You can back up from there. Like, what was the last week like? What was the last 2 weeks? For me, it's like a month often, where it's like, if I don't tend to the day to day, week to week stuff, then it's all going to feel like it's piling on. But that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes honesty, like being really
Yeah.
honest with yourself about, for me, just how introverted I am, or like how many social things I can reasonably go to, or how I really can't do late nights. It's not a thing for me. I don't do it. If I do, it's planned a long time in
Yeah.
advance.
Well, and you started touching upon, like, when you went about it without the deadline, right? Without the detox to retox, how did that come about, or how did you go about that change where, okay, it sounded like you were thinking like, okay, this is going to be a longer thing. I don't know if you said like, okay, I'm not going to drink again, or what that was like, but do you want to go into that a little bit?
So it was just becoming problematic in my relationship with my husband. He had talked to me about it a couple times, and just like there was like a Thanksgiving before I quit drinking. So 2021. I definitely drank too much too fast. And I mean, I was probably like drunk within a couple hours. And he had a talk with me that night. And then I probably did the same thing where I'm like, okay, I'll take a few weeks off and, try to moderate it and whatever. And the thing is, I was successful moderating a lot of the time, but what was going on in my head wasn't healthy with it, because that's not how I wanted to drink. So maybe I'd have one or two while we're out, still able to drive or something like that, but then I would want to drink more when I got home.
Yeah.
Or it would give me anxiety to think like, can I drive, or should I drive, or how much is too much, or how quickly can I drink this, and when is last call, and where is the server, my wine is almost empty. Like all of that is what would go through my head. And looking back, it's like obviously that is that dependence that I'm talking about. But so I could like put on the show that I could successfully moderate, but it was just chaos in my brain. And then what really did it was Memorial Day weekend 2022. We went camping with some friends. I drank way too much out of that box of wine, and got
Box.
like okay, for camping it makes sense. You don't want glass there.
I like what you said before about I didn't want to know how much or whatever. It was cheaper. We were talking about that. Like, yeah, I would drink lots of different things, but I always kind of had a box of wine there because I was like, oh, well, if I don't know, I could just add that into the mix and it didn't count or something. I don't know. So yeah,
yeah.
I
the lies.
Yes,
the lies we tell ourselves. Yeah, it's just like my coffee mug.
Yeah.
I only had one cup of coffee.
I'm the one with the sensible coffee mug today. This nice small one.
You do. You're moderating caffeine effectively.
I will not lie and say that I'm moderating caffeine for sure.
Okay. Anyway, that night was really bad. I mostly blacked out. All I remember is crying before bed and my husband asking me if I wanted a divorce because I was acting like I wanted a divorce. And I still haven't had the guts to ask him what happened, but in a way I already know. Like I would have I call them episodes, like these bad drinking episodes when I would just be like a raging bitch to him. I would find some reason to be mean to him. Mm-hmm. And it's like I felt like being angry and I'd find a reason to be angry and I'd take it out on him. It wasn't frequent, but it wasn't uncommon. Like that, it happened. And I really could be mean to him. And so, I told him that night in this like drunken haze, like I didn't want a divorce. And that's when I finally said out loud, like, I think my drinking is a problem. And I'll commit to not drinking until we have this vacation in 2 weeks.
I thought you were going to say like next year, 2 months. No, 2 weeks. Sorry.
No, I know. But I found the Reframe app. And so I'm like, well, it could be different. Like it could be different for me. We used an app to quit smoking like years ago. So I just started looking for this app, like an app to track my days or something like that. So I found Reframe and I took it seriously. And then I went on that vacation and I actually did a decent job. I didn't drink every day while I was there. For the most part, I had one, maybe two, until the last day. Like the whole reason we were up in Michigan was for one of my best friend's weddings. And that was our last night there. Again, I got blackout wasted. And that was like I consider Memorial Day the day that I knew something needed to change, and
Yeah.
the wedding was just really just sealed the deal for me. Like, this needs to be more permanent. Um, because it, God, like I didn't get any pictures at this wedding. I don't really remember it. There are people there that I will never see together in a room again. Like, we all live in different states and there's children and,
Yeah.
all of like these complicating factors where we haven't been in a room together in like 20 years and we probably never will be. And it's like, I forgot conversations. Again, no like pictures, nothing. It, looking back, it really breaks my heart too, because it's just sad that that's what it took to
Yeah.
decide to quit drinking. And I still don't say forever. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I've done enough work now where I genuinely do not have the desire to drink. Like,
Yeah.
anytime I want to drink, it's to self-medicate, and I never want to go back there.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I like one would never be what I would want anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm like super duper happy without it. Like, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Same. So one of the questions I wanted to ask too is with that change. So we're in the summer of 22, a little over a year ago. So just curious, what are some things that helped you? Whether it was, we always talk about tools that we use, or just those like mindset shifts that we go through. Like, what do you feel helped you along the way here?
yeah, it's definitely evolved as I get further and further from my last drink. In the beginning, I attribute a lot of my long-term success to being almost a student of being alcohol free. The first maybe 2-3 months, I was like reading and listening to Quitlet, listening to podcasts, joining meetings, doing my tasks. If there was ever any doubt, I would go to bed early and like listen or read a book. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't care about trying to have a social life. I didn't care about trying to keep anything normal. I didn't try to introduce too much exercise. I didn't really do anything but like study this stuff. And that, like I said, probably 2 months of that. And I recommend that my clients do this too, but I also wrote a letter on that last hangover day after the wedding, and I documented everything. I documented that Thanksgiving conversation. I documented the Memorial Day, how terrible I felt about treating my husband poorly. I documented the wedding. Um, and then all the hangover symptoms. And it was just like, never again. I never want to be like missing out on parts of my life. I don't want to do that anymore. I don't feel aligned with my values. I don't feel like I'm being the person that I think I am, you know?
Yeah.
In the beginning, it was a lot of that. And I would go back and reread that letter where it was just like 3 pages of nitty gritty detail of how alcohol was preventing me from being the person I wanted to be, and really outlining what happens when I drink. You know, when I think of that vacation, it's like, yeah, I had like a few good days in there where alcohol wasn't the main character
Yeah.
and I didn't take it too far. But then the most important thing I blacked out for and missed out on all of that. Like, that is not successful. So that really helped with playing the tape forward. Like, that is still, I think, one of the best and strongest tools that anyone can have in their toolbox. And I like to play it forward both ways. Like, if I drink, this is what will happen. Like, I always go back to that vacation. Like, maybe for a few days you'd have a couple and that would be fine. But like, inevitably you will binge drink because that's how you like to drink. And then I'll play it forward if I don't drink. What happens if I don't drink when I have this craving? And it's like, I can wake up feeling proud of myself and I won't have a hangover. So I'll be able to eat well and I'll have the energy to coach my clients and walk my dogs and go to spin class, and I'll sleep really well. And I just tie it back to things that are more important to me than having a night of most likely just tuning out. Like, that's
Yeah.
usually what I would want, is tuning out.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, those are like the most tangible tools that I would rely on directly, but a lot of the indirect stuff is like setting up a life that I genuinely want to live and be fully present for.
Yeah.
Like that was a big part of it for me. So, yeah, I mean, I feel so much more like confident and courageous being alcohol free, and um talking about like setting up my life in a way that I don't want to escape or I don't want to like tune out. Part of that for me was realizing that I haven't wanted to be an actuary for like the past decade. Like I probably never should have gotten those credentials. And while not everyone should just go and quit their job, like I've had my nutrition credentials since around 2018, 2019, something like that. I was working a business on the side until I got too sick to do it. And then, going alcohol free has really opened up that opportunity for me again. It creates so much space when you remove that. For me, when I removed that substance, it created so much space in my brain, in my life, like actual time. And I feel like my life is just fuller than ever because now I'm coaching on Reframe, which is incredibly fulfilling. It's the community that helped get me sober. So giving back to that feels amazing. And then I have the nutrition business on the side of that. And it's like that is the biggest alignment for me
Yeah.
because not everyone has that ability, that flexibility, the resources to make a huge change like that. And I recognize that, but it's like work with what you can, um,
Yeah.
so that it's just so easy. It was easy for me to be like meh about a job that I was good at and had a lot of comforts and security. Like I let go of just feeling like it was stealing my life force, I guess, when I had alcohol to lean on for that. And then, after about a year of being alcohol free, it was like, nope, I can't keep doing this. I will want to drink again if I keep living like this. It just isn't who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I get that too with um, a lot of the same feelings there related to previous work. And I think you said before when we were talking before this about how, like, you said that it forced you to get rid of the things that don't light you up, I think is how you phrased it. That's so true. And it's like, okay, yes, I had this, like you did, I had this, I was a tax guy. What's more secure than death and taxes, right? And same thing with the actuary job, like you just said, like there's only 20,000 people in the world who, had the credentials that you did. You just realize like what you kind of start stripping away those behaviors that allowed us to self-sabotage or to do the things that weren't lighting us up, or that kind of thing, where it was just, it started to slowly pull back the veil and realize like, yeah, this isn't what, I didn't say this at the time, but it wasn't what like lit me up anymore. um and my slow process of getting into coaching and doing that was, it just slowly started to be like, I looked at it, I'm like, this matters to me. Like this matters, and this matters to me. Whereas the other job just was great, secure, but didn't as much anymore. um but that's a tough, it's scary too. I don't know that had I kept working there, if I was concerned, because I worked there for about I was coming up on like 3 years after I quit drinking, after I started my own process. So I had to make changes along the way, but there were still a lot of the same tendencies that I had, and would cause me to look towards avoidance and all those things in just different ways. But they weren't all productive, right? I mean, it's not like, okay, I found all these tools and now I use all the productive tools. No, I mean, I mix in plenty of unproductive tools as well. But that's fine too. Like, right? I mean, it's my unproductive tools now aren't harming me and my body and my mindset and all that.
Right.
Um,
Well, I don't know if you ran into this, but my work performance started to fail at the end, and I was always a super high achiever, so that was weird because I like could not make myself work hard at my actuary job. Like I did like average, but that's like kind of below average for someone like me. So I would say that my work product was starting to deteriorate because I
Yeah.
just could not get myself in the headspace to care or go even slightly above and beyond. It's like I will hit this deadline for this one thing and then I'll probably go take a nap. I
Um,
just couldn't do it.
yeah, I would say my work product didn't go down. I'll say I've never I never said this phrase before, so I don't know if this makes any sense, but my life product went down, right? It looks like everything else was suffering because um because I worked all the time and I was successful. I heavily involved in all these projects and things like that, and I worked all the time. And drinking was my escape from that. But everything else was suffering. So I think that's just thinking about it now, like that's really where it came from. It showed up for me. Was like, oh, okay, well, oh, it's my daughter's soccer game early on a Saturday. Like, oh, I'll catch the one later today. I'm not going to go to this one. I'm hungover. I had to work. I'm stressed, so I had a few too many last night, or something like that. Like, it wasn't every time, but it was just things like that that showed up that started chipping away at me, I would say.
Yeah. Well, and then it's easy because if you're overworking, it's so easy to make that the excuse. Like
Yeah,
you know, because you could just as well been like exhausted from working too hard, even if you didn't drink,
yeah, yeah.
But it's like we can still just use that as a reason. I was more talking about my work performance suffering after I quit drinking. Like
Oh, okay,
probably like 6 months after I quit drinking. Like I like could not make myself do it.
okay. No, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I would say towards the end, whenever I was like really going to transition into this, I was just like, oh, that's when I was like, oh, I can't bring myself to care about this. I still did my job, but I was like,
Yeah.
the care isn't there anymore. So moving forward, after 1 year of being alcohol free and that, like, um, how's your mindset towards, obviously you're still not saying forever and that type of thing, but what are you involved in now, and what's helping you now?
Oh gosh, so many things. So quitting the actuary job was a huge part of it. So now I'm on board coaching with Reframe, which is awesome. My passion is to help people, but I don't think that everyone can possibly realize how much the community helps us as coaches too.
Yeah.
Not just from like an accountability standpoint, but like it genuinely moves me every time I do a meeting. And I'm like getting a little teary eyed thinking about it because it's just so special to share the space with people.
Yeah.
And then to be able to like give back in that capacity on the other side of the Zoom, where it's like I'm providing some feedback and people are trusting me with their stories and with their shares. And I don't know, I'm just really passionate about being able to give back in that way and to this community specifically. And then I also have like I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, so I
Mm.
have my nutrition business, the Sober Rebellion. So I used to work like pretty specifically with burned out women, like I was, like women's hormonal issues, chronic fatigue, stuff like that. Um, After about I would say 100 or so days alcohol free, I was like, I don't see a lot of intersection with recovery and nutrition. And I think that's super important. I mean, I know like Dr. Brooke was like used to do things with Reframe and stuff like that. So I know
Mhm.
there's some people out there doing it, but I'm like, I really think this is my calling. Like
Yeah.
having people like level up their recovery through nutritional therapy, through these like functional wellness practices that we can get into. And a lot of it is through life coaching, like giving you the permission to relax on your body standards or permission to rest when you need to, instead of, being this type A person who's always trying to produce and do and do and do. And it's like, what would it look like to just chill? Like, how much of your health conditions are caused by the stress you're putting on yourself?
Mhm.
And, how can we like do the mindset work to make you feel worthy as you are right now? Because you are. So that's a big part of it. And then now that we live in the city, getting out in nature is a big thing for me too. Like I will feel tempted to slip if I don't get out in the woods like once a week.
Oh, really? Once a week? Okay.
I mean, maybe
Nice.
not that,
Yeah.
but um
But
and it's not like I don't think I would slip. It's just I start feeling that like tightness
yeah.
in my chest, that overwhelm where it's like everything is too much and I need an outlet and I don't have an outlet and I don't know what to do with all of this energy. Like, and it just feels like just fire, like
Yeah.
heaviness in my chest. And that's when I start feeling like I want to tune out. Like
Yeah.
I want to tune out when I feel all of that on top of me at once. And the best way that I've found to get rid of it is to walk a dog somewhere and usually out in the woods.
Yeah, and it's so important, right? To find that thing that you need, right? That's positive like that, and that you're able to take advantage of, and work in those more positive coping skills, right? That we have. But the thing that again that lights you up, getting out in nature, getting out in the woods, there's so much benefit to that, or just getting out and walking your dog around the block if that's all you can do. Um, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, I guess I do keep it kind of simple, but I would say like sleep is my biggest non negotiable. Tired will always be one of my bigger triggers. And I think that comes like that heavy like chest feeling I was talking about. I can feel that way if I'm too tired too. And so really like dialing in sleep was really important to me. It's like super boring. Just like the nutrition stuff that works is super boring. It's like, are you drinking enough water and
Yeah,
like eating fruits and vegetables and stuff? But it's like, I don't know. I think we all want kind of this like magic bullet, magic diet, magic recovery plan or
yeah.
whatever when it's like, yeah, not all of us need to um to be really like implementing things that are this intense or complete lifestyle overhauls. It just doesn't need to look like that for everyone.
Yeah, I'm talking in 2 hours of one of our meetings, and I think the topic's going to be like centered around patience. And like you said, give yourself permission to rest and all that. Give yourself permission to. It's not going to be like if you go and you go to, hey, I want to cut back, I want to quit, like whatever your thought is, like recognize that you have that thing in mind that this is what I think I need to do right now, but also it's going to look different. When you keep going down this road and you keep working on it, it's going to look different than you expected. Take away the expectations of, hey, I'm going to do this in this amount of time. I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to also do this, and this along with it. Give yourself permission to just focus on this one thing. And if it's, everybody talks about like, yeah, we give up or cut back on alcohol and the sugar monster comes, or, those types of things that come in. I'm eating all this sugar and all this. And it's like, okay, but that's your body is craving that because you were eating all the sugar before. It was just an alcohol. How can you like relax yourself and not be perfect and just work on it? Find the tools that work for you.
Yeah, it's just such a quick recipe for burnout. I mean, this talking about my whole cycle, like my whole entire life, the cycle that I was doing was this all or nothing or binge drinking.
Yeah.
And like it was like everything that was healthy and perfect and awesome. And then that's just not sustainable. And then I feel like a total loser. And then I just drink it away for a while until I start it all over again because I realize I'm drinking too much. It's like, that isn't healthy either,
Yeah.
like that isn't. And I do think there's just this element of self sabotage when you're someone who's more drawn to having these like high standards with yourself because it gives the illusion of control. And it's much scarier to say, oh, I put everything into passing this exam or whatever, and then I failed at it. Like that's a lot scarier than saying, yeah, I tried, but I didn't try that hard.
Yeah.
You know,
I'll try
I think
again
that's
next
where,
year.
yeah, I'll try. Yeah. Next cycle, whatever, it'll be there. And, and I think that's kind of like extends to what you're talking about with like the patience stuff where it's just like, why do we need everything right now anyway? Like who told us that? I mean, I
Yeah.
know it's the human condition and it's, I mean, that like social media does that for us too. Or I think of like dating
Yeah.
apps where there's like always someone new to swipe on or something like that. Um, but it's like, why can't we just be peaceful with ourselves and be accepting that, if we're just like cut out the low hanging fruit. Like if alcohol is the biggest thing that you're dealing with right now, whether you're looking to cut back, whether you're looking to quit, like there's time for everything else,
Yeah.
especially once like the alcohol's gone, like so much space opens up, and it's so hard in the beginning because you're not on that other side of it yet. It is really a testament to willpower and trusting the people that came before you that it won't be like that forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's everywhere too, right? And the fact that it's whether I'm at home and I'm stressed and I have a drink, or we go out with people. Oh, let's go to a bar. Let's do this. You're at the wedding, right? There's alcohol. You're at the 1-year-old's birthday party. There's alcohol. Like it's just everywhere. And so you're used to being in all these situations, whether it's with others, by yourself, dealing with this emotion or that emotion. If it's there, if that's been the tool you've used, you have to recognize that it's going to be hard to start to unravel that. And you might feel overwhelmed because you're getting hit on all fronts. So just focusing on maybe pulling back from social engagements, if that's how you drink, or being more social. If you drink at home alone and you can be more social, maybe try that, or just trying to work on, like you said, the low hanging fruit, but recognize that it's not as simple as we might make it out to be in our head. Because I was the same way. I was like, oh, I drink because of work stress, and so I don't know how I'm going to get through the work stress without it, but I'm gonna do it. And then I stopped and I'm like, oh shit, I drink because of every single emotion, every single thing. Like it's not just work stress. I was fooling myself there. But whenever I started, I was like, okay, just do this, just worry about this, because this has, like I said, since it's everywhere, since it's hitting all of these different areas, when you work on this, it has that ripple effect out to your sleep, your nutrition, your nourishment, your exercise, your relationships, and all that. Um, so yeah, focusing on this one thing can have so much more broader impact too.
Yeah, I actually don't recommend that people start working with me in nutrition if there's someone in recovery, either cutback or going alcohol free, until they're like three or more months in, trying to figure that stuff out, because I just don't think it's smart to pile all of this other stuff on when you're trying to make such a big lifestyle shift and improving or changing your relationship with alcohol. Like that will always be the most health promoting thing you can do, no matter how much sugar you eat outside of that. Like giving up or reducing your alcohol intake is always the most health promoting thing. And so it's like you just don't want to be in a position where someone's trying to work on their hormone health or dial in their sleep a little bit more, and see this all the time where like healthy routines get in the way of being healthy because they become a new addiction or a new like rigid
Stressor,
rules kind
yeah.
of thing. Yeah, a new stressor. Yeah, where it's like, well, I'm supposed to be up before my alarm, and then I have to drink the lemon water, and then I meditate, and then I journal, and then I have breakfast, then I go for my walk, and then I go to the gym, and then I like shower and get ready and go to work and what, and it's just like okay, like
I'm stressing out just hearing that list. Yeah.
but oh my god, but that's like not, that's
Yeah.
like something that certain influencers will say is the way to start your morning. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And,
And
and
there's
I
nothing
might
wrong with that.
know, and I might start my morning like that, but it's been over a couple years that I've built up the things that worked for me and figured it out.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, why don't you start with like 5 minutes and
Yeah.
just give yourself 5 minutes before you like look at your phone or whatever. Like, let's start there and see how
Yeah.
that goes. But I mean, I think when you're looking at people in recovery from alcohol, cutting back or whatever, I consider both to be recovery.
Yeah.
We jump all in. Like it's, we're diving into the pool and we like that intensity. And even, I mean, I said this on, I think your Saturday meeting the other day, where we kind of get this high from the chaos. Like that gives us a little high. And then if we're not aware of it, then we can jump in like that into something like a morning routine or some kind of nutritional plan or workout regimen. And there's nothing like inherently bad with that stuff, but it's just like, for people who maybe depend on exercise to keep them, in their alcohol free or their like drink goals. What happens if that exercise is taken away from you? Because it happened to me, and I'm dealing with an injury right now. Yeah. So it's like, making sure that toolbox is really well rounded, where you have maybe something creative something creative, something active, productive, vocational, I don't know, just like different categories that you can kind of pick and choose from depending on how you're feeling, I think is effective.
And using like that, like, right, the obstacle is the way, right? Where, okay, I'm limited now in doing this. I might be frustrated with this, but what else can I do? What else do I want to do that I know you said you might have done, like you do pottery or, different things like that. So if I can't, if I had surgery on my knee last year, can I get into something like that or some other activity that can help me versus being down that I can't do this one thing over here.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get back in the pottery studio. We'll see what the MRI says.
Good luck with that. Well, Steph, thank you for joining today, sharing your story with us, and you can let people know where they can find you. And also, this is the first episode of the new I don't know if it's a new season or just this new segment of the Reframable podcast, and just letting everybody know too that you will also be joining us as a co-host here this season. So, but if you want to let people know where they can find you and share anything that you'd like at the end here, please do.
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram. I'm at The Sober Rebellion. You can find me on my website, thesoberrebellion.com. I have a really nice freebie there that it's like a nutrition guide to eliminating your sugar cravings. So if that is something that you're interested in, you can hop over there. And I'm taking recovery clients through the Reframe app and then nutrition clients through the website. So thanks for having me, Kevin. And I'm looking forward to a fun, reframable season.
Yes, thank you for joining, and no, appreciate that, and all that I'll put in the show notes as well. And yeah, Steph, thank you for joining us today and sharing your story.
Thanks, Kevin. Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Bye.